This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 5th episode of True Talks with Project Managers offered by PMI Southern Maryland chapter. I'm Marina Prasik, president of the chapter, and tonight's topic is globalization and project management. Some of you may know our host by now, Kendall Lott, and we have new guests every episode. And tonight our guests are John Cable, Director of Project Management Center for Excellence at UMD, and Aiko Nwankwo, PMI board member. And I will let you get to know them later on with the introductions. But in my portion here, I'd like to welcome you all tonight and also just give you a couple directions to make sure that logistics are, let's say, making this experience pleasant for everybody who will be attending tonight and everybody who will be able to watch this recorded session later on. So during the show, please turn off your cameras. Turn on active cameras only so that you'll be able to see the people that are speaking, mainly our host and our guests. And use the chat for questions. Please do use the chat. We had already that experience in the beginning, and it's a great interaction. After the show, you will receive one PDU. You will also receive a survey that we really appreciate your feedback on. And of course, you'll have the opportunity to access online and view this recording again. So now, without any further ado, I have to introduce you to our host. Nonetheless, actually, the leader of the PM Point of View, Kendall Lott. Kendall, welcome tonight again in leading this episode for our guests.
I'm due. Do you see me?
I can see you.
Excellent. I see you as well. Is Harry out there? I see Harry out there too.
There you are. Welcome, Kendall. Thank you for another adventure.
Hey, Harry. Okay,
Harry,
well, I'm glad we're back. Go ahead.
Harry is our vice president for the PMI Southern Maryland chapter, and Harry will be following the chat. So don't worry, your messages will not be disregarded. Harry is watching for any questions that are coming through.
Well, we'll take as many as we can as we move through. So ask good questions. We talked about this before. It was one of our lessons learned, right? We're not going to save them up. if we'll see them at the end of segments or we'll see them as we move through. So ask some good questions. No questions means there's no answers. So you got to ask to be told, right? So that's what we're after there. But PM True Talk. So how are you enjoying your summer, first of all? Because we took a little bit of a break there.
We did. We took a little bit of a break. It was a good working summer.
Well, welcome everybody on the call here, because I was thinking of this. This is like more chat and less commute. So as much as we want to be in person, I think that's a pretty good idea for us. So I'm up for the lack of commute. We wouldn't be able to get everybody together. So with that, let's talk about something here. Tonight's topic's around globalization. I think you and Harry kind of cooked this one up for us and reached out for some guests. So frame it for us. Why globalization? Why this topic, Marina? Why does that matter? Southern Maryland, like, what's the deal?
Well, you know, globalization, if you think about project management as a function, has never known frontiers. The PMBOK guide, in fact, was initiated to drive us to have a standard methodology that is recognized globally. So now that we work more and more with international projects and we speak the same language with other project managers, how do we make our projects more effective, knowing that there are no frontiers? There are no frontiers in project management and in many other functions. So that's how we can deal with it.
It's a discipline without frontiers for sure. And I think that's what some of our guests will speak to tonight, or both of them will probably, as I've talked with them before. So that's a great topic, and I'm glad we're able to have some representation around that today. So with that, why don't we get started with our first guest then? So I want to introduce the chapter here and the people listening to our first guest, because I've got your global expert. We went global for it. I think Harry and Marina both reached out to make sure that we were covered on that. Working both in the UK and in Nigeria, and calling in tonight from London, I have Ike Nwankwo. Ike, you out there?
I am, Kendall.
There he is. So I'm officially reading through his bio here. He's 22-year expert of all things PM. At least that's what we hear. Multinationals, and now he's managing director of his own firm, Distinct Management Limited. It's a project management consultancy, and it focuses on IT and construction. Now, why we care is because you're calling in from London, so you're like in the midnight hour here, I think, right? You're in the late times.
Yeah.
You're in the tomorrow days already. But one of the fun things for us is, folks, he's done the PMI volunteer dance. So first he's been with PMI Nigeria, as I understand, with the chapter there, and then you're now PMI Global, because he is one of our new members of the board. You were elected in January, is that right? This year?
Right. Correct.
Okay, so we kind of want to know what made you do that, but if you got to the board, that means you're an influencer. We understand that. So we'll take that as read, that you're an influencer of some sort. So we're glad we have you here. He's also clearly analytical, folks. And I know that because I looked at his degrees. He's got so many degrees, BAs, masters. He's got more certs. My ink went dry printing the document on his certs. I have cert envy. But most importantly, we know he's analytical because he's addicted to Scrabble and Sudoku. So my first question is this: do you play Scrabble online or Words with Friends to burnish your global cred?
I do play with friends and online a lot. There's been a recent update to Hasbro in terms that makes the online game of Scrabble, that has made it more of a game type thing, building up points. Which has discouraged me from playing online these days. So I prefer to bring out my Scrabble boards and then play person to person. And then actually put my hands in the tile bag and bring out the tiles to play games. It has a different feel.
Project managers liking to be tactile, I believe it. So Ike, calling in from overseas, having worked overseas, what does this globalization PM conversation even mean to you? Like, what part of that is interesting to you?
It's a good question. First of all, I'd like to just clarify things here. So although I'm on the PMI board of directors, I'm actually here in my personal capacity. So we may talk about some things related to PMI and the PMI strategy and going forward. But what I say today is my personal opinion, and it's not necessarily the direct opinion of PMI or the board of directors. And it's actually apt that way because we're talking about true talks. You know, the whole perception of today is about true talks. You know, with a project manager and myself being a project manager, I want to make sure that I you know, sort of talk to the trueness of the topic we're talking about today. So going back to the question about globalization and project management and why it's a topic of discussion, if you know, projects don't happen in isolation. There are reasons why projects happen, and I think the key thing now is that organizations today are becoming more global. They're trying to do more projects across the continent, across the world. They're interacting more effectively with other you know, countries, cross boundaries. And I liked what Marina said. There are no frontiers to project management. So there's a lot of cross boundaries. Now then, we have teams that are multicultural and geographically dispersed. That brings the need to bring out the concept of what you could call global project management. But I think the key thing to bear in mind is that project management itself, and if we take the definition from PMI in this case, you know, the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities, there's nothing there that says it has to be local or global. It is naturally global, and it's waiting to be applied to an environment. Now, if it's a global environment, which is where the world is going to today, then we apply as project managers the skills, knowledge, tools, and techniques to that global environment. So it's really about organizations trying to drive their projects. And if it's a global project, then project managers have to step up to the global nature of that project that the organization is trying to drive.
Well, that's going to speak to the skill set that we actually have then. So you've moved us as PMBOK 7. By the way, those of you that get a chance, read that. I don't know how many people on here. I'd love to see it on the chat, by the way. How many of you on the chat have read the new PMBOK? It just came out a little while ago, I think. You're going to be surprised because they have completely changed pretty much their approach to how they're representing the profession. So I think that's pretty interesting to me. But back to the question of skills. As you think of it as a global discipline, or a discipline that can be applied, what we said globally, meaning cross-culturally, I think it also means across different types of legal frameworks. Correct. And different types of, it's not just culture of interaction, it's the culture of what constitutes effectiveness in some cases as well. What skill sets are you seeing that are going to be needed when we talk about applying knowledge, tools, and practices?
That's a very interesting question. Very interesting question. I think adaptability is the first thing I'll say. You need to be adaptable because, as we said, we're crossing geographies. So you need to be able to apply the right tools and the right project management style for the specific geography. If it's across a different geography, if it's across different environments, you need to be adaptable. So I think the first and fundamental skill I'll say is ability to adapt to the situation, to the environment in which the global project is happening. And recall, it could be a global project across different countries with different policies, different politics, different cultural nuances. And then you have to be able to adapt within the same framework of your overall project to these different geographies and different cultures and policies and politics. So I think, first of all, I'll say adaptability. There's also soft skills. We talk about soft skills and power skills, the ability to negotiate, discuss, and communicate, which are standard skills that project managers should have. But the key thing is being able to be adaptable so that you can change your style to suit the environment you're working with in a global context.
Yeah, I find this interesting because on one hand, you say that, I'm thinking of the cross-cultural experiences that I've been engaged with, and I'm thinking, wait, that's what we should be doing as project managers anyway. What you've just said is not new in that sense, right? But then again, right, that calls back to what you and Marina said, which is this was always designed as a discipline without frontier.
Correct.
right? So I think that's what we're saying, is that we can double down in that space.
Yeah. So, and remember, we're talking about globalization. So if you think of the early days of project management, the traditional project manager was sitting in his organization, delivering projects within his organization, talking to team members within his organization. So
Yeah,
the amount
yeah.
of skill is, you're sort of constrained to your own organization. So the tools and skill set you needed to use was within that organization. So you didn't really need to adapt much. But as IT and other as companies decided to globalize a bit more, you now have yourself working in one organization, but needing to interact with another group of people, maybe your developers in another organization in another country, and maybe with consultants in another organization in another country. So now you're moving out geographies and boundaries. So you now have to adapt. You're not staying within a single, should I say, organizational environment. You're now in a more global environment, multi-company, multi-culture, multi-geographies. And that is why you need to be very adaptable to the difference in these organizational cultures, behaviors, trends, attitudes, in order to deliver the project objectives.
One of the things we talk about is we're all trying to make good, right? Project management transforms inputs into outputs, right? We're actually transformative in that sense. And I think one of the questions becomes, or one of the facts, I guess, one of the theories that I would have is that everywhere, everybody is trying to cause the transformation when they engage in project. Like that's a common way that, a common outcome that we all seek for. So that gives us a common alignment. And then we have the knowledge and tools that are similar. That's my theory. I have a question for you. You have worked in projects that were in one country or one company only. In other words, ones that are not transnational or not global in nature. Is that true?
Correct. Yes.
So compare and contrast. Thinking about, as you think about the need for adaptability and communication, classic cross-cultural issues, how would you see some of the biggest differences between those that are being executed in country? We have Southern Maryland here, people who are working inside Southern Maryland area. How does that environment change for them when you think about that, comparing it to global? I don't mean the fact that the culture is different. I'm saying, what are the things that are fundamentally different in projects that are delivered cross-culturally versus non-cross-culturally, non-global?
So it's a good question. I think on a high level, the principles remain the same. What you need to look at as a project manager is what I call the local nuances. Okay, they might be using different tools. They might have a different way of applying techniques towards doing the same thing. So the principles will stay the same, but you look for those slight differences or the slight local nuances in the way they do that. There might be different regulations in the way that you have to apply. They might be, it's a different, I won't use the word culture, but political, office savvy type environment that you have to get used to and adapt. I have to come back to culture. There will be traditions, let me not say culture, there'll be traditions that you have to be aware of that you need to apply. So you need to understand that environment in order to now apply it. And it changes from company to company, even in a different country. It will change from company to company because they have their own different traditions or way of working. So there's no specific thing that I can point out, except that when you get there, just look for those. You have to be aware that the way you've been doing things might not be exactly the way you can do it in a different environment. Look for those slight nuances. Ask your team members, ask your colleagues, ask people that have worked in the similar environment, and look out for those nuances. Ask for those nuances, those different nuances, and then apply them. Be adaptable to apply it.
When you're talking about that, it made me think of something. We all believe that we have a values alignment with our organization, and by values here, I don't mean in this context, not the dollars, but rather our personal. Think of it as ethics and values alignment. And now many people increasingly work for organizations that are not local to their own geography, their own proximity, their own lived experience, their own culture, even within the United States. So I'm starting to think about like tech firms, for example. One of the things around projects is that they are supposed to be working towards the value, now I mean it with the dollars, the need that the executive classes wanted, that somebody chose to invest dollars to cause this project to be. so that we get an output that we are selling or that is a dependency or an input to something else. So my question is have you experienced, and what is our conversation? And John, I'm going to be asking you this too, I think, which is when we work in projects in our locale or with our people, even if they are in a virtual environment, how do we negotiate that with the value of an organization that may not be in our country and doesn't even cause any conflict? I mean, you've worked in different ones. I'm not sure. Have you worked in the UK or in Nigeria for companies where the decisions to have that project were generated in another country, in the US or in Brazil or in the UK when you're in Nigeria? In other words, how do we achieve value, and the value is representing a class of decision makers who are not in situ and not where I am?
It's a good question. So, so if value say a large organization has a value stream and it's being developed, is being pushed to another country, how do you get that value concept accepted within the project within another country? It's a good question, but
does it cause conflict? I've always been curious with that. If I'm working in Malaysia, am I thinking, wow, I'm working for a UK company here in Malaysia, delivering value to a UK country? How does that work with a project team?
It can sometimes cause conflict, and I think this is where the ability to negotiate as a project manager comes in. It can cause, because top down, should I say, top down decisions generally have an impact. So I'm trying to give an example, and I use an example of a merger. I've been in organizations, so two companies merger, UK, US, two different companies. They're merging together. Let's say it's the US company, as an example, has majority shares and merges with a UK company. Now these are two different cultures coming together. So when there'll be a way of working that the US is used to that doesn't necessarily go in line with the way of working of a UK organization. Now, those kind of transformations take time, because you have to do a cultural shift and a people reorientation of each individual to get those two cultures to merge and then find that middle ground. It can never be top down heavy, because I give you an example that I've experienced. Job titles.
Oh yeah.
Maybe in America, you use a lot of VP this, VP that. In the UK, it's manager. So you can have two people in the same position in a merger. One is called manager in the UK and another person's called VP in the US. Different perceptions coming together, and then people are looking at it differently. So a UK person might look at the VP as a higher role and vice versa. And it creates conflict there. And those are the things, when I talked about local nuances earlier, that you as a pure project manager need to understand these differences. So you're looking for these slight nuances between the two organizations when you're doing a project, to pull them out and then put strategies to deal with that. And that's just an example. There's language as an example. I know that Americans call certain chips. The UK call it crisps, you call it chips, and vice versa. You could have meeting conflicts because you're using the wrong terminology as well. These kind of things are the local nuances that, as a project manager, you need to understand better so that you can better deliver the project. So if it's top down and you're in the middle as the transformation lead in this case, or the project manager, first begin to understand those nuances between the two organizations.
Yeah, I've always thought that it must be hard. I experienced some of it on my own overseas. It's one thing to learn the transactional level of interaction. Hey, you're on my team. We need to learn to be able to talk together or be in the same time zone or whatever, right, as we work together. But it's another one to start thinking about what constitutes value, because there's definitely different impressions of quality and value that are deeply embedded in some cultures. And I've often wondered, as I've worked in different environments, like, how would this be interpreted somewhere else, right? And I think that's like at a deeper level, not just a transactional level, although we experience the transactional level, the interactions in team meetings and the alignment of things like you said, job titles and words and vocabulary. One of the things that we had talked about before that I think is interesting is the role of networking.
Yep.
And you drew a line to adaptability on that. What are you getting at when you're thinking that our ability to network or to be networked is meaningful here?
See, the network is powerful. So the powerful network is that you can, it allows you to be in one way local, but have a global reach, at least within, the PMI sector. So if you're networking effectively and you're looking for local nuances, you can actually, and you've got a good network, you can actually reach out. I mean, putting a PMI hat in, we're extremely good at networking. That's what we do. So where you have started on a global project, you're working in a different region, or you have to interact with a different geography. If you have a good network and you're effectively networking, then you can reach out to that. Also, by networking, you get to begin to understand some of these nuances or some of the different ways of working in different organizations and different geographies. And that's the power of networking. So I think through networking, you can get to learn more. Obviously, if you want to know about a country, go to the country. If you can't go to the country, you can read about the country. But if you can talk to people that are either based in the country, been there, working there, doing projects there, even better. There you can get, real life experiences from the individual. Different geographies, even if you haven't worked there, you can begin to understand the different nuances across countries because you're just networking with different people globally, in this case, to get an understanding of what's going on. And by the time you talk to a number of people, you start getting a feel of what these local nuances could be across different countries and different geographies and different organizations. So I think I love networking in itself because it exposes me further to different environments.
Yeah, and then that reminds me of something. The fact is, you joined and got yourself elected to the PMI board, and so the question to me is, as an institution, what is your take, observing as a volunteer, coming from your space, not as a representative of PMI, but what's your take as you observe the Institute in its support of that function? They gave us the standard. Marina talked about that. That's what this new, the project management standard is for. They set the standard, and they set a number of standards, actually, right? But what is their role in the networking from a global perspective? Or what could it be? What should we be seeing there as individuals?
It's as individuals. Are we talking about the PMBOK or the way the organization?
No, PMI, the Institute, because it is a global organization. And so my question is, you put your finger on networking. So we know that they teach the tools, or they lay out for us the knowledge, tools, and techniques. We can all go and train them, and then we go and apply them. But one of the interesting things to me is that as a global community, it seems that the role of networking would be valuable there. And I'm wondering, the opportunity to do networking would be valuable there.
Yeah. So most volunteers will know that PMI holds leadership institute meetings, that it brings people from specific regions all together. We have the NA conference that brings people from across the world together to network. We have a virtual series, yes, that talks about things, that tries to bring everybody together. It's global across the world, open to PMI members. And these are all platforms to encourage networking amongst individuals, as well as share the message of PMI. So PMI actually does a lot of networking events. Even on a local chapter like this, we're still, there are networking events that occur. This is one of them. And then chapters themselves actually invite individuals, volunteers from other chapters across the world to also get that global perception of how things are done in that specific chapter or in that specific country. So PMI, its volunteers and its chapters do a lot to encourage networking as a whole. I think it's the fundamental behind which PMI operates. It promotes networking, totally promotes networking.
Yeah, I think you just called out something that I experienced as well, and I'm glad you said it. And we have our leadership today from Southern Maryland here. You just made the call for volunteering. The opportunity to work with your chapter gets you to the regional level, gets you to the national level, and it helps you engage with the international level as well, as a professional in the space. And I know I got a lot out of it. I think I went to 7 different limbs, leadership, management, leadership institute management conventions or events over the years. So big thing there, everyone. Get on board and volunteer with your local chapter wherever you are, and start engaging that way. It's a chance to engage in a way that you don't at work, at least not necessarily. With that, there was a Harry flagged a question. I saw a question go flying by, but I didn't quite grab it as it went by. Harry, you got a question to throw up for us to Ike?
Yeah, there's a couple for Ike, but the first one is regarding mentoring a team globally, and how do you handle any issues with mentoring a team as it relates globally?
Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good question. I think, see, using the term mentoring is quite interesting, because mentoring is you're trying to guide them. So you're not actually telling them what to do. You're trying to guide them the best way. So the key thing is that globally, if you apply the general principles of mentoring, you ask the question, what's the issue? Where you're helping them? What is the specific problem? Now, it might be generic, so you can give the generic answer. But if it's global, then you give advice like what I just said, attend limbs, e.g., or try to network with others to gain information. There's nothing specific that I can put my finger on when it comes to mentoring, because each situation is different, each individual is different, and you need to understand their specific concern or challenges and address it there. So on a global perspective, I find that when I'm mentoring, they're different. I don't want to use the word ethic, and I tend to go back to the words. There are different traditions of ways of working for different individuals, either within their organization or within their country, that you have to understand first in order to better advise them on how to do the particular project, if it's a case of project, within the environment. And you need to understand that first. So you can't be biased and say, the way you do it in the UK or the way you do it in the US is the same way they need to do it there, and then put that knowledge and try to transfer that knowledge verbatim across to that individual. You need to understand the circumstances and then adapt. And I go back to adaptability. Adapt your experience to what they've told you, and then see how it best merges and comes together. So it's all about adapting to the situation there. And we all know that every project is unique. That's one of the key fundamentals of projects itself, is unique. So you have to understand the environmental context, and in this case, the individual context that you're mentoring, so that you can apply your experience with the knowledge of that environment, and then tie the two together and then give them guidance that way. So it's all about just understanding the context in which you're mentoring.
Well, we're at the halfway point here. So, Harry, do you want to ask one more? You got a short one up there?
Yeah, it's a quick question. It's somewhat related to the first one, but it has to do with an example that was given in Saudi Arabia, where this individual was having coffee before getting down to business, as sort of a cultural norm in Saudi Arabia. So the question is, what advice, I guess, can you give to others who are going into another country before talking business? Some of these cultural norms, like Saudi Arabia having coffee. What is your experience, I guess, and what maybe advice can you offer to somebody who's going into a different country and wants to talk business, but wants to do it in such a way that it's following the cultural norms?
Yeah, so I'll give two examples. I used to work for an organization, and then we used to travel a lot as part of the project manager. We actually had crib sheets. So that organization, because it took globalization and the interaction of project managers with different cultures seriously, actually had crib sheets that says, if you go to this country, these are the traditions. You must adapt to these traditions. US, give the tip. If you go to Japan, and I'm using examples, look at the business card when you give it. Don't just put it in your pocket. So you need to understand those. So if you don't know them, if you don't know now, flip side as an individual, ask the questions. Are there any specific cultural nuances that you should be aware when doing business? I know in Nigeria and most parts of Africa that title is important. So if somebody's a chief and I call them by their first name, you've already insulted that person. I know that in my early days, when I used to work in Nigeria, I had to call the person sir. It is just respect. It was a culture, you call them sir. When I transitioned to when I came across the UK, or when I come to UK and do projects, I can call you Henry. If you are in Nigeria, I have to get the balance between that to call you sir if you're in a senior position and not call you Henry. Because even if you understand it, the fact that I call you Henry is considered almost insulting, or I'm degrading you unless they understand that friendship. If you don't know that, you can lose a business deal, or you cannot get support from your team members because unconsciously you have actually affected the tradition and indirectly insulted them, so they won't be happy with you. So it's up to you as a project manager to really understand these things, that don't assume anything. Ask the question. If you're going to an environment you haven't been to, ask those questions. Look out for those little nuances and then learn them and then apply them. And if you don't, be quick to apologize if you haven't.
Say you're sorry
Be
and
quick.
fix it and get it done fast.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
listen, we're a little over halfway, so I'm going to clear the stage here real quick and bring up our next guest. Web watchers all, your next guest, you know him, you love him, because you probably have PDUs from him, from something he's done. You might even actually have learned something from him. My PMFF, project management friend forever, John Cable. John, I spend more time introducing you or your programs than I do actual project management anymore. I think you're everywhere.
Great, and I'm happy to hear it.
Excellent. This is John Cable, Director of the Project Center for Excellence, James Clark School of Engineering, UMD. So we're going to get into what Ike was saying there that you might want to play with there, but I did want to bring you on, and I'm glad you were invited as a guest because your background, both with PMI, but through the education side. Very specifically, how do we see education as a global phenomenon and in support of this rather globalization that we're seeing? Can you just frame anything around the education side of this as a person who's running a graduate program in project management?
Well, first let me say good evening, everybody. It's great to be with you again. And Marina and Harry and Jeff, you guys are always great. I love to be with you. Let me go at that a couple different ways, Kendall.
Yeah.
When I started at Maryland in 1999 and looked around the globe, we were able to identify about a dozen universities worldwide that offered project management degrees. I've lost track since I left the Global Accreditation Center, but when I left in 2015, we had a list of over 450. So from 2000 to 2015, we went from a dozen to 450 institutions. I think from an educator's perspective, we're having to work on multiple dimensions. The first dimension is there's always the need for fundamental PM basics. You know, what are the things you always need to understand and do? But as we've grown and become much more sophisticated in the much greater complexity of the projects, part of that complexity is the global nature of many of them. The fact that a project team can have people that have never met each other, but they're on the same team working from different countries. I asked a close friend of mine who, before he retired, was head of project management for Hewlett Packard. I said, hey, Ron, why did HP adopt PMBOK? And he said, we needed a global standard to establish a vocabulary so no matter what country you were in, you understood what a work breakdown structure was, etc. Everything, and Ike, it's great to meet you. I look forward to further discussions. But everything, Kendall, you and Ike have been talking about just really emphasizes the growing value of really appreciating all of the soft skills. You know, for years we've been teaching soft skill stuff, but what's happened as we've become much more global, and many of the new firms, the tech firms, are clearly working across national boundaries. And what's happened is that from an educational perspective, we have adjusted our focus even more on the complete range of soft skills that are necessary. Ike mentioned the notion of appreciating cultural differences, and you have to really pay attention to that. I can give you an example, and Ike, I wish I were with you in London. I love London. One of my sons is there, and I go every time I get a chance.
It's a long commute for a webcast.
It's a long commute, but it's one I do with love. When I was in college, I got offered a job in London to work for, and by the way, one of the things I knew immediately that I would like Ike because we're both architects. So all you engineers, you're listening to two architects tonight. But when I was in college, I got a job in London, and I had to go to London for the summer. I ended up staying a year. And I asked one of the professors at school, I said, tell me about England. You know, tell me, what do I need to know? He said, leave all your jewelry at home. They think Americans with rings and bracelets are rude and crude. So leave everything except your watch at home. Be humble. Don't flash anything. Don't be the ugly American. Try to appreciate the cultural differences and work within them. And boy, that was many moons ago. But what you guys were just talking about really embraces that in spades. I'd like to go to a slightly different thing on globalization, if I might.
Yeah, take it.
And that is that the rapid development of AI is meaning that our workplace is changing rapidly.
Yeah.
The skills that project team members need are going to be much more in the critical leadership, communication skills, because a lot of the things that we used to grudgingly spend a lot of time doing, we don't need to anymore because there are algorithms that can do it better than we could. And so keep your eye on the rapid change in skill sets when we're dealing with how project or the management of projects is evolving. And what I would say about the pandemic is don't waste a good crisis. I mean, we've all been forced into things that many of us perhaps were uncomfortable with, i.e. Zoom and GoToMeeting, and you know, we've got Zoom death and all that. But we're spending a lot of time right now thinking about what have we learned that we're not going back to normal. We're going to define a new normal that's better because we're going to take advantage of what technology offers us, as well as what we've learned, you know, the good value of networking face to face. So, you know, before the pandemic, you guys in Southern Maryland, how many of you would have had a meeting where it was totally a video conference? Probably not often or not many, but now you can accept it as a very efficient way to meet. And one of the things that I talk to the companies about when they talk to me about protocols and things like that is I say, look, if you're starting up a new project, bring your team together if you can. Get everybody in the same space for days, weeks, or whatever the time scale is. But then once you know each other, you can really go and use the virtual meeting space much more effectively. So I won't presume to know how the changes are going to occur. But what we do know is, I don't think we as educators are going back to the way it was. And I don't think you as practitioners should be going back to the way it was. You should be looking for, how can we utilize technology to improve our effectiveness? We're doing that on the educational front, and we're trying to get out in front of it to be able to provide support to you. You guys probably don't know this, but we are just in the midst of launching a brand new master's degree on product management. We're getting ready. We're a year later, we're going to launch another new master's on program management. And we're looking at what are your needs and how can we position ourselves to be able to help you. And I think that's all part of globalization. You know, there's more to it than just different cultures, different boundaries. It's, you know, we have to take advantage of the technologies, et cetera. So I'm sorry, that's a long answer to your question, Kendall.
Yeah, and actually I have a question coming up. I'm gonna go ahead and bring Ike back up again. And then Harry, you said you got a question for Ike. You can come on up on the stage. And then Harry, you had a question for John?
I do, yes. The question, John, is related to online training. And, you know, how has that changed the focus or impacted University of Maryland?
Thank you, Harry. That's a good question. In 2018, my dean asked me to look into putting just-in-time learning on one of the MOOC platforms, which is edX. And edX is one of half a dozen platforms. It happens to be one that was a joint venture between MIT and Harvard, and Maryland joined as a partner. We are recognizing the need of the working professional to really have high quality, just-in-time learning that they can do very fast and very effectively. And that's what the edX platform enables you to do. If you don't need a certificate that proves you did it, it's free. If you need a certificate or want a certificate to take back to your employer to say, I've completed this verification, you know, the certification, then it's a nominal fee. I think our courses cost something just under $200. So, you know, for a university level course at $200, you're getting a great deal. We are so committed to meeting that need that I have a full team of people working on building short courses for that platform. We're launching a new course every month. And by this time next year, we will have over 50 courses available on edX. And so if you need to sharpen your skills on Agile, we've got a bunch of courses and you can do it on a weekend. If you want to sharpen your skills on digital analytics or decision-making or leadership or managing teams, any of the topics that we teach, we're putting them on edX. And we're working very hard at learning the most effective way to communicate high quality information in the shortest amount of time. Does that answer the question, Harry?
It did to me.
Yes.
I want to ask a follow on to integrate here with the two of you then. But what you both have described is the need for basically the soft skills and the ability to understand those things. We talked through some of the cultural issues, but it strikes me that even from where Marina opened, project management is a fundamental capability. I mean, it is something that we believe anyway, all companies need. And in fact, when they are global, so must we be prepared to act globally. I just, to me, that's just the business pattern that we're following, unless I'm wrong. So if it's a fundamental capability, I think it's being recognized and has been more and more over the last couple of decades as needed by all these companies. So my question becomes, You just talked about connecting it to product management. We've heard it from program management, and that connection, I think organizations, multinationals have seen that. The question is, where does this skill sit, and what is the role of formal training then in a global context? I mean, should people on this site here, as long as it's in a language that they understand, should we be finding the other places to get the training, the certifications? Everybody's recognizing the need of program, project, product management. What do we need to do for formal training?
Well, my view is it just depends what your needs are. And
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is give you a menu of different skill sets and topics that you can get up to speed very quickly. In every one of our short courses, we have a lot of references and a lot of material is provided if you want to take a deeper dive and follow it through. There was one other thing that I wanted to emphasize that you guys talked about earlier. And I think in terms of globalization, and Ike, you addressed this a little bit, is that it's even more important than ever to understand what the customer wants.
Yeah.
And it's hard enough when we all speak the same language. It's multiply times 10 when we're all speaking natively different languages. And you have to say, what are the power operators in Germany that are building this nuclear plant in the UK? What are they really trying to do? What defines the business value for them? Because our role in the management of projects is to deliver value to the customer. And when you put it into a global context, it's more difficult than ever to understand what are they really trying to do. We can read the scope of work, but the person that got stuck with drafting the scope of work might not have accurately reflected the needs. So throw that on the table.
I thank you for that, because I was trying to reflect what the organization is demanding as from like an executive class, that value structure. And when there's a dissonance in there, potentially, you just hit the other end of it, which is whatever the customer is, and then that's that focus. Ike, what are you thinking around that? What's your experience on that customer focus? Because that's what we're seeing more and more of, right? We can't operate in a vacuum. It is about, hence the agile even, right? How accurately can we get to what the customer need is? How do you see that being different yourself in your experience globally?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think if I step back a bit, no project exists in isolation.
Right.
Okay. There's always a purpose behind it. No project exists in isolation. And then the nature of the project determines whether it's global or not. So the example on, Germany building power plants in the UK is a good example. Yeah, but they all have different drivers. And I think the real thing is to understand that driver and then interpret it to suit the environment in which you're delivering there, to make sure that the customer also understands it. And then get that middle ground, because you might find that one place to put it and put it hard, hard fact, we want to do this and it's all about making profit. Let's put some financial figures in it. But there might be some softer things that better apply to UK environments, that you don't need to directly talk about the profit, but you're talking about the benefits to the environment, which indirectly will lead to profit. So you balance the two together to make sure that you're still achieving the overall objective. And it's like when you're working on a project, what your stakeholder, the executive, might tell you as the value of the project and why they're trying to do it. You may need to interpret that slightly different when you're talking to your team, because it's like breaking it down into simpler language so they can understand the value and therefore they can commit to it. So it's almost like you perform a translation role in order to translate a maybe more technical, high-level value into a less technical, more understandable value, but they still tie it together so that your customer understands it better, and that way it still feeds back into the the top level value. It's about breaking it down and explaining it in different ways to different communities or different stakeholders.
That's interesting. Marina just put a comment into our chat about that very topic that I thought was really interesting. And call out to John again. I was just setting up the next week, the PM Point of View podcast will come out about UMD, your symposium. We're beginning to send out some of the podcasts so everybody get a chance to hear some of the hot topics out of the 2021 symposium that you ran, John. And one of the topics is on attenuation of signal. The attenuation of a transformation is driven by an organization top down. And what you guys have just hit on, and Marina's hitting on, is it's even more difficult in a global environment, more difficult in sharing value with the customer. And she's highlighted here this requires consistent effort to build shared understanding. The need to constantly perform hygiene around communications, right? The maintenance of communications to stop the attenuation. I think is what I just realized. If you thought it was hard before, now you're really going to be shocked.
That's true.
That's what I'm hearing you reflect there, right?
You know, the example that EK used about sitting down for coffee first before getting down to business. Whatever community you're in, they have different cultural norms. And if you want to be effective working in that community, you better learn how to appreciate and adapt to those norms. And that's a fundamental part of the communication.
Yep, adapting to the norms. We're going to have to start to leave it there, guys. Kind of as a wrap up, I think mostly because I'm so tired here. It's almost 8 o'clock. I'm so sleepy. So I don't know what you're up to over there in London, dude. But I think before we sign off here, how can people get a hold of you, follow you? Where are you on LinkedIn? Do you guys blog? What's going on? How can our viewers follow up with you or hear more about what you're up to?
Go ahead.
I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You might find me twice because but you know, both of them are me. So you can get me on LinkedIn, and that's the easiest way. You can get me on LinkedIn.
Well, we'll watch for any new policies and changes coming out of PMI that might enhance our networking. Since we know you care
PMI
a lot
is about yeah. PMI is about making ideas a reality, and that's what we're all about: transformation, making ideas a reality, and there's more coming out for that.
I love it, love it. John, how do they get hold of you?
Well,
Find you walking around on the campus?
No, I'm on LinkedIn, but everybody knows jcable@umd.edu. Just send me an email. And
and if they can't find you, they can get a hold of me, because again, I think most of what I do is introduce you to stuff. So that, I mean, you know, like here he is again, being amazing.
Works. We appreciate it.
We'll call that out. Hey, Marina, are you out there? You want to tell us what's up next and close us down, take us out?
I'm back. What a fabulous, fabulous talk show. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ike and John. Thank you so much. We hope to have you again. We hope that this talk show is continuing to being successful. And thank you so much. This was very, very enjoyable. Of course, for me, international collaborations are very exciting. It's something that I think it's very rewarding as well. So I'm going to tell you where we are going to go next. And sharing my screen again. Well, you will receive, please remember, you will receive 1 PDU after this session. Take the survey, please. And you're going to find us actually tomorrow night back online with our book club. We have our monthly book club, and we have one, in fact, tomorrow night. So if you have never joined us, even if you haven't read the book, just try it out, join us. If you remember, it's actually another free way to attend and have a conversation with some peers. So that's an excellent way to network. True Talks will be back in August. I have to leave you with the suspense on the topic yet, but it will be coming out soon. And I want to give you a little peek on what is going on behind the scenes for all the chapters in Maryland and Washington, D.C. We'll actually be having a virtual National Capital Area Symposium September 22nd and 23rd. So look out, watch out for the registration coming out soon. That is a great way to have a ton of PDUs. And with this, I would like again to thank Kendall, our host, and to thank John and Ike. Thank you so much for our guest, and very, very insightful. And with that, I wish you all good night, and I'll see you next time back in August.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.